Welcome to Wellness Radio with Dr. Jeanette-Gallagher as your host. Her show discusses topics of health, wellness, and spirituality, and is about discovering your place in this great universe, from your cells to the cosmos. Along with her guest, in casual conversation, she strives to ask the difficult questions that may be holding you back from a vibrant life, and shares new ideas that may inspire you to make a change in your life that you only can see in your dreams. And now, here is Dr. Jeanette-Gallagher.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Wellness Radio. This is Dr. Jeanette-Gallagher, and it's a pleasure to have you with us here this evening. Tonight, we are going to be talking about our journey of evolution, spiritual journey, a soul journey, a human journey, a shedding journey, perhaps coming to know the self. Is this not the time, the year 2023, in which we are starting to realize that we are living in the Matrix? We are living in a time where there are so many possibilities, there's so much potential out in the world, and truly all of that stuff we were stuck in, the old books, the old dogma, the old stories, and the old experiences no longer fit. What is our life all about? What have we gone through? What are we experiencing? And how much joy can we say, wow, bring on the next wall. I want to see what it's made out of. What is it all about? And the joy of being able to be in the world at this time. Today my guest is Beth Bell. Her book is Angels, Herpes and Psychedelics, Unraveling the Mind to Unveil Illusions. What Beth and I will be talking about today are our experiences and how awesome they are. They may not have felt like it at the time. They may have felt like they were going through a meat grinder, one of those old-fashioned ones that you turn the handle on the table. But definitely, looking back in retrospect, it has been an awesome life. Beth, thank you so much for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. I'm sure we're going to have a lively discussion.
I'm so glad to have you because, right at the topic, I'm going angels. Oh, awesome. We checked that. And psychedelics, everybody knows about that. And then who would dare put the word herpes on a book? And you're going, oh, good. Awesome. We're time to speak to someone who wants to be real, someone who wants to share, someone who has to said, I have got to just move through this, and I am vulnerable and sharing everything. Isn't that what your book is about?
It is. It's about going deep into the soul and tapping into that inner wisdom that everyone has and oftentimes are too scared to go and find. And then they just spend a lot of time looking at the external world and wondering, why is this happening to me when it's actually happening for them to help them awaken?
Right, because also, too, the words even is a cast of judgment. It's always about the words. There are judgments, there's shame, there's guilt, but really it's just like a filter you are looking through. That's how you're seeing the world through, where you're seeing your experience through, and that's how other people are judging you. But when you really start to open yourself up, you're going, these are just words. That's all they are. They are just words. And how can you find a way to be able to stand tall in the face of all of these words? Don't you think many times people, even in this year that we are in, are still stuck in a lot of that judgment?
Absolutely. Yeah, I 100% agree. It's words, and words create stories, and people want to hold on to these storylines, and COVID was a beautiful blessing in so many ways. I'm not saying that I'm not honoring the pain that it did cause a lot of people, especially the loss that took place, but it was a time that it was clear that everyone needed to do deep inner reflection about the four walls that they had built, who was in those walls, what they thought of themselves. They couldn't do the external, stimuli and distractions, and so they really had to go deep, and some people went deep into the suffering, and other people said, maybe I need to look at things a little bit differently. And it is really about blowing up these storylines and breaking through beliefs that stop us from knowing who we really are and helping us to attain just that powerful place of knowingness and beingness and oneness out there in the world. And so I think COVID came at a perfect time to wake a lot of people up, and that's really the whole mission behind writing all these vulnerable stories, is that I really felt called to share some of the things that had happened to me in the storylines that I did hold on to for quite some time and have let go of, and some that I'm still working on. But I think that when we share with others, that's when we can really get to the heart of the matter, and when we just open up and release, secrets or shame or guilt or emotions that we don't even know are in there, that's when the true healing can actually begin.
Right, because what happens is that sometimes people are afraid to share their stories because they feel as if they've always been cast upon. They're not worthy, they're not good enough, this whole value thing, or things that have happened to them, or it's your fault, and you didn't do enough forgiveness, you're not a good enough person, when in essence, everybody has gone through that. If you have ancestors that grew up in the early 1900s, 100% across the board, your entire family lineage has been through some form of this. It's just a matter of fact of who is speaking, who isn't speaking, and who is growing and evolving. And truly, when we start saying about the last several years, it comes to how many walls are you going to hit? People have been hitting walls, over the past several decades individually. In the past 2 years, the whole world hit a wall. It says, stop medicating, stop trying to fix money to fix things, or to buy things, or to go out, or to escape, or to have more, or to have this or that or the other thing. You can't do that anymore. You can't go out and have people and their energy try to fix something that's inside of you, or to turn around and try to suck the life out of somebody else, so to speak,
Right.
So the idea is that there were perpetrators and there were victims, but a lot of it had said, stop, no more. We're going to take a break here. And if you look back, can you remember what you even did in that year and a half? I can't.
Well, I can, but I hear what you're saying. And I also wanted to say thank you for bringing up herpes in the title. I can't tell you how many interviews I have done that it is completely ignored, and it's obviously on the cover for a really good reason. And I think one of the things that came forward with COVID was, I think now everyone understands virus shame. And so many things happened there, and I actually had a little bit different version of my book in the beginning. And once I started to really understand that everyone needs to open this virus shame idea up, then I became even more vulnerable in the book, and shared even more details about what actually had happened to me, because at the end of the day, it's always about viruses of the mind. And that's sort of how we started this, right? It's the words, it's the stories, the storylines, and they're viruses of the mind that give us this false sense of self and identity of who we think we are out in the world, when there's characteristics that we display and that we carry, but who we really are at our core is not all of those things that people from the external world see us as. And so it's always getting back to that real depth of our own inner wisdom and pure love.
Right. If you can really strip it down, we've always spoken on this radio show over a decade now about we are so much more because we are just energy source beings. And if you look at it, how many times have we hung over the edge, we've actually died, had near-death experiences, on and on and on, within one lifetime. And we're starting to recognize that. Whereas in the past, people just died early. They just that was the end of it. But now we're living longer, and we're having a lot more of these experiences that we're able to start sharing these stories. And I think the idea, just as I shared with you before the show started, when you had written on the front of your book, Unraveling the Mind to Unveil Illusions, I had said, are we checking reality to find the illusions, but are we not finding that reality is the illusion? So if we can become to that point, how free might we be to be able to live a totally different life, versus reality is all about fitting in, validation, reciprocity, everything has to show up all the time as such to be able to be seen. When it's an illusion, it's up to the possibility to find that projection to be able to see what it is. It's all quantum energy. It's totally different. So do we want to live in the solid, hanging out with the gang all the time and always getting all these likes and all that other stuff to be able to know who we are? Or can we step out of that? That's a big difference, and I think a lot of people are very scared of that, don't you think?
I do. I mean, everyone needs to come to this place where they understand that you are the dreamer of the dream. You are the producer of the show, and every character you've called in is here for a very divine reason. It doesn't always feel like it in the moment, but everyone's here to teach something, and you've called them in, whether it's someone at a Starbucks, that happens, or it's a romantic lover or a family member. Whatever that character is, there's something there. There's a nugget for you to understand something more about yourself and get into the depths of who you really are. So, yeah, I agree. And I think a lot of people feel like they're victims and that things are happening to them. And it's just, that's not the case.
It's so interesting. I had recently, I think it was 30 years ago, I was living in Scottsdale, Arizona for a period of time for medical school. And I remember distinctly saying when I was finished, it was the land of the perfect, the hard and the dry. And it was just, everything was quite right. It's supposed to be right. And I said, I don't want to be here. And I wanted to go back to where I lived before, where I live now, New Orleans, because it is so free here. You can, I even said to my husband one day, I said, let's go put on an evening gown and we'll go walk downtown and maybe have lunch on a Wednesday in the afternoon. He says, what? I said, we'll just tell them we were at a wedding. They don't care, because that's the kind of freedom that you're able to express, but your environment also supports it. Sometimes when people are starting to expand their awareness, their environment doesn't support an expansion. Do you think perhaps you've found that many times in your experiences?
Yeah, and I think you bring up a really good point because, as you know, each place has a different social construct, a mind consciousness, and people don't even realize that they're ingrained in these ideas because maybe they've lived there all their life and they haven't really gone out and about. And I've been blessed with the opportunity to be able to go and live in different areas of the world and experience different cultures. But what I really started to understand is how ingrained a lot of these beliefs and these constructs are that people get so locked into that they can't see another way. And so the storylines get deeper. The ideas about themselves, about life, about all these different topics just get stale almost because there's sort of passion in one line. And, I think one of the things that's great about a psychedelic opportunity is that they're pattern disruptors, and they can help with neuroplasticity, and they can help get you back to a place where you're not so ingrained in one line or train of thinking, whether it's your religious beliefs or your political beliefs or your community ideas of, what's right and what's wrong and what's good and what's bad. And, and so we start to get down these roads in our mind that lead us to like a very staleness about ourselves that I think a lot of people don't even know because they haven't experienced something different. And that's why when you go away to somewhere like maybe Hawaii or something where there's just magic in the air because Mother Nature is prevalent and people are open and free, you feel something magical. But magic is everywhere. It's just a matter of breaking out of that. So yes, to your point, I think that a lot of people aren't able to really, well, they are able to allow themselves to expand, but sometimes the fear creeps in and stops them because as you expand, perhaps the partner in your house isn't expanding at the same rate, perhaps your community, perhaps, right? So your ideas start to actually expand, but then you start to look like a unicorn. And then oftentimes people also don't want to quite break through that fear of thinking that maybe they don't fit in. And I also feel like that's a big point of the book, is that, you know, this is about freedom, and it's about your individuality, and about expressing yourself, and about feeling your feelings and going deep in, even when society says, oh no, you know, don't express emotion, or suck it up, or, you know, all the different ideas that we get ingrained with from our childhood and from our communities. This is about, no, let's break out of this. You know, let's break out of this, and let's really experience life to the fullest, and let's get through the trauma and the drama and the things that have caused us suffering, and see them as incredible opportunities to move forward in a totally different way.
Also, too, the idea of an area, a certain area, what it supports, community or a person. Just as you shared in your book about one of your relationships, you can almost feel as if a breeze came by you and it said, whoof, and it kind of sets you on another trajectory. It sets you into another, all you needed was 1 degree off and you wouldn't meet. You know what I mean? And it's so awesome when that happens. I can't tell you how many times that's happened to me. I can distinctly remember being in a court one day, and the judge asked me a question, and all of a sudden I just heard, say no. And I said no. And it set off a whole train, which really looked very negative at the time. But when I look back at it 30 years later, it was the best thing ever. It was for my benefit and for this other person. But I think sometimes we get a little concerned when we say, we kind of want to scramble back, and, you know, a lot of people will say, oh, but I'll fix it, I'll make it better, I want to go back, and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, just keep your head forward. Just keep on going forward, you know? And I think also, too, to touch on, Beth, is that a lot of this, as I've noticed within your book, one of your relationships, I said, person was her past life. This person had eons of something about with her before. That's why she keeps getting sucked in when they just keep, engaging again. And I went, that's what that was. But I think it's also, too, we can find that in our area. We can find it relationships with people. We can find out our relationship with a job or a profession or whatever it is. It's something that our soul brought into this world, and it had been there before. It brings deja vu of all the soul experiences. It's not just about this one. So don't you think when you were traveling to all those places in some of your relationships that they were perhaps maybe some of those older times?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I as I'm sure you know, we all run in soul circles, and we come into these lifetimes going, yeah, I'm going to set myself up for this, and this, and I want to learn this, and this. And so those individuals, I definitely have had some deep karmic entanglements with. And yet they're still, I do love understanding some of the lifetimes that I've lived with some of the individuals that have had such a hook for me in this lifetime. So I find it fun, because for me it gives me a little bit more to chew on as to like, why is this happening? But I don't necessarily focus a lot of energy on all the other lifetimes and things, because it is about the here and the now, and what is it that I'm looking to do. And I think one of the other things that you touched on was that inner wisdom nuggets. Like when you said no, it's like it's when we get in touch with that inner knowing that we trust, and then we're not questioning. And innately, I think it's just part of the humanness of people that we sort of get this program in our brain early on to think, what's the right answer? What's the right answer for society? What's the right answer to make my parents happy? What's the right answer to make someone else happy? Like, what's the right answer? And so we're looking to our external environment to come up with the best answer. And for me, that's been probably one of the hardest things over time, because I came from big pharma, I came from strategic brand planning, I came from if-then thinking, scenarios, all of that. And that's all good. But when we let that thinking drive our life and we don't tap into the inner wisdom that has those true north points to guide us to make the big jumps and to take the risk, when I had no rationale for a lot of the risks. I like to say intuitive risks, because that's sort of what I coined, was this intuitive risk-taking, that a lot of the times I knew I was not going to have, a third dimensional response to anyone who might question me. Why did you do that? And
right.
Because it was one of those deep inner knowings that I said, because that's how I knew I needed to handle myself in that moment, and I did it. Whether it was, move to Singapore, or it was to move to India, or move to Bali, or, leave my career and go to Costa Rica. So there was lots of times when I'm sure, my parents probably sat there and said, oh my goodness, now what? Where is she go? What's happening next? And somewhere along the line, they're in my whole soul group as well. I think they just started to feel into the magic of how things did align, and sometimes they didn't align. I mean, hey, there's a story in there that moving to India felt like, the perfect divine guidance, and in the end it was, sleeping with the devil, and it was one of my incredibly deep life lessons that I needed to learn to understand about energy at a dark level. And I kind of was in this phase of, I'm a light worker and I understand the light and I only attract people from the light, and boy, was that a silly idea, right? But as you know, we got to learn lessons, and people can tell us that, no, you got to know the dark, you got to understand the balance, the yin and the yang, like we get these things intellectually, but then when we get the opportunities to actually practice, then sometimes we fall deeply into the lessons and we learn things the hard way, because that's what gets our attention, And so for me, I look at a lot of those hard situations, and I wouldn't necessarily want to have to repeat them, but I wouldn't necessarily take them out either, because I learned so much from them that made me who I am today and the journey that I planned for myself.
But also, too, looking back at the past, or being in this karmic relationship, or being attached to past lives or whatever, they are essential in the point that you're saying, I see you. But in essence, that also ignites something in you that you are saying, I see you within me. So there's something inside of you, that's needed. And sometimes to bring up a past life might be, awesome. I'm done. That's great. I see you. Thank you so much. Sometimes it's just an opportunity to wave to a ghost or a spirit and say, hi, I see you. Or to say, thank you so much. Even though it was a rough journey, I needed a co-pilot to get where I am today, and you were awesome. You were the biggest devilish dark energy you could possibly be. I so thank you. I think sometimes people are so afraid to thank the dark for showing up, because it served a purpose. I mean, like, I embrace dark all the time. I mean, I went to the voodoo store to buy some incense and told the lady I was a naturopath, that this is about several decades ago. And she says, we don't like your kind around here. I'm going, oh, holy crap. Why not? And then for the next 2 years, I had death threats every day. So it was sort of like, well, what the heck? But it was just something to release, to let go and say, I see you. Thank you so much. It was awesome to have that journey. Because I think even so in your book, Beth, Angels, Herpes, and Psychedelics, I mean, some of these things may seem very dark in some spots, but you can turn around and definitely be so thankful for every single moment of your story, right?
Yes. And I think that there's so much to learn, and there's so much more to learn in every life journey. And the more we look at life as an exciting adventure of learning, as opposed to, the suffering, which is easy to get into, especially in today's world. But again, I think that's why the energies are at play right now, saying, hey, wake up, make a choice. Where do you want to play? And, what part do you want to play in the awakening and healing of humanity? I think a lot of people really want to contribute to making Earth a better world. I think they don't know how, and I think it's always starting with yourself first, because at the end of the day, we're all just here to shine the light and show the way. We're not here to heal anybody else, which is also another big lesson that I had to get myself through. because we want to help. We want to help other people. And sometimes we want to help other people at the mercy of our own expansion and our own, next level of awakening. So, yeah, it can be a tough playground at times, but the more magical we ask for, I think the more fun we can have along the way, as opposed to seeing it as difficult.
Yeah. I had this, I was sitting down writing one day, just doing, without my glasses, because I can't see anyway, I'm blind as a bat. So I just sit with my phone and I just start typing, this kind of, what do you call that? Unconscious kind of writing. So, and
Remote
I was writing.
writing.
Yeah, and I was just going and going, and I don't even know what I wrote, and I don't usually read it until several days later. And I had written down something that it was truly, hold on, and I totally just went poof right out of my head. Hold on a second. Oh, I know. Okay, so what I've really written down was, sometimes we get up in the morning and we say, well, what am I going to do today? And then we talk about our experiences and blah, 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 and my day, blah, blah, blah. And then some people will say, well, God was with me, whatever. And I kind of had realized what I had been doing for many, many, many decades. I said, what are we going to do today? That's what I say when I get up. What are we going to do today? What are we going to experience today? Meaning myself joined with source energy. It wasn't the identity that I was going out so that I could fall or flaunt or whatever. I could make this accomplishment or whatever. It was more that the energy that's in us, what are we going to explore and then to be able to share or inspire others later? That's a huge, that is like a 180 other side, of the way most people are living.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's a great idea to do, because then you're recognizing right away that you are part of source and oneness, and that you're not alone. Because I think a lot of people feel alone. I certainly have my own bouts of loneliness, but as Osho speaks so eloquently about, it's about aloneness. And I am. Yeah, I think I'm someone who understands the power of just sitting in your own love for yourself and being able to be alone and feel connected to everyone and everything. And that statement is a great one. I love that. I'll use that myself as I wake up.
It's so funny that you just said that, because I've been having, readers, just as you shared in your book, psychics, intuitives, all these people we always go to get readings and stuff. And I remember having one, I think it was probably 30 years ago, and the person had said to me, they said, Jeanette, do you ever engage with humans? You're just chatting us all up. You're just all spirit all the time. And I said, no, these human people, man, I just can't get a handle on them. And I distinctly remember that, because, when we say we're in an alone time, that's when I'm with my spirits. I'm my happiest. It's when I have to go out and engage with the humans. It's going like, oh, a sludge is coming at me again, So I think in essence, sometimes, just as you shared in your book about homelessness and things like that, and things falling away and things crumbling and not having much and all that other stuff, that's only the density that fell out of the way of the story that you had just gone through. And now, in other words, you can't take the old story with you to create the next experience. You have to, leave all that behind. So it's truly, essentially important, because otherwise you wouldn't be able to move forward. It's sort of like, you get a new job, and, my job is in scrubs all the time. Well, I think by the time I get back to my high heels, they're going to disintegrate, where I'm going to stand up and the heel's going to fall off or something, It's sort of like it just doesn't mesh. So do you think when some of your stories that you had gone through all these countries, you truly had to leave the entire thing there? You didn't bring India to California. You know what I mean? You didn't bring Bali to wherever else you were going to live. It was very separate in its entity and story.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I also think that I came to a place where I could actually cherish the story, so that it wasn't something that I felt like I had to leave behind, but something that I recognized was a really intricate and important part of the puzzle that I had set myself up for. So yeah, I feel like I cherish that more than anything, because I don't think we need to, and I know you're not suggesting this, but, leave something, because then we're just running, right? We have to run through everything. We have to experience everything as a result to the end of it. Meaning, if there's unresolved feelings or business or whatever, we need to get to that so that we can then have the expansion on another level and not have the vibration of that hold us back in that energy, right? And that is the inner work, right? That is the integration. And again, I think that's where psychedelics, in the right set and setting, I'm very particular about how I speak about psychedelics, because I do believe that they are awakening agents and that we do need to shift the narrative around it. But it's also a very sacred opportunity to be able to open yourself. And for me, I felt very blessed that by the time I actually, because I always said, I'm never, I'm an anti-drug person, and I would never do psychedelics, So the fact that I have, and that I've put it in a book, and now I'm, a spokesperson for psychedelics and plant-based medicines, I'm also a huge advocate for the appropriate use of them in set and setting, because I was blessed with the many, many years of building my foundation of understanding a lot of concepts that don't appear to be in this reality, but certainly are. And so when I did have my psychedelic experiences and really just obliterate the veil and be able to see and feel and embody oneness, that I had a toolbox coming back in this dimension to really help me embody that and work on the North Star even more, to know that I'm already there. It's just a matter of remembrance. And so when people step into these experiences without intention or without any, protection, and I'm not saying that from a fear standpoint, I'm saying it more from a discernment standpoint, a discernment for your soul and for opening your soul in a place that's safe and sacred, and that you also understand some of the things that happen on that side. Because for someone like you, who's always been very open and understands many, many dimensions, you already have that toolbox ingrained. But for others who don't know a lot of that and then shoot themselves out there and don't have an integration coach or aren't with people who can hold the space, things can get a little bit crazy. And I'm not saying that that's not part of their plan too, right? Because that might be part of their plan, that they make those decisions, that those situations happen in the way that they do. But I do very much believe in safe set and setting, sacred shamans, sacred servers. I am by no means an advocate of just recreational usage, because I really do understand what's happening in a lot of these dimensions, and I don't think we need to expose ourselves or open ourselves to things that aren't necessarily set in our plan, or that catapult us too fast, too far, when we're not ready for that. So, I think there's a lot to be said about the safe use of psychedelics.
I think a lot of times, if we could look back over the decades, there's been a lot of use, abuse, and misuse of drugs, therapies, treatments, in all aspects. It could be alternative, natural, or medical, pharmaceutical. It doesn't matter what it is. There's all kinds of experiences. And if you look at it, people have pushed the envelope in whatever time frame they're in. Some made great scientific experiments and found great theories, and they were able to prove them, and wonderful for medical science. Others that, may have fallen off the edge, and a lot of casualties along the way. So I think the idea in the year 2022 about psychedelics is perhaps maybe even 10 years ago, that would not have even been something that was appropriate for many people. But if you even look at it, the conversation we're having today, the words we're using, the dialect we're talking about, the inspiration we're sharing and talking about our experiences, we wouldn't have done this 10, 15 years ago either. So it has to be that everything is in divine timing, that the expansionness of society in their own evolution of consciousness all has to be in sync, so to speak, because otherwise truly ended up with casualty of a society or a humanity, and things would have really gone haywire. So I think in essence, we're all in the place at the right time. What you and I are doing today is sharing all of our stories and experiences so others can say, I had a hint of that. You're giving me some more information. Now I'll be able to explore what happened to me or what's going to happen, where I am now, whatever it might be. And it gives them a little bit of hope to say, there is something different on the other side of possibility, and are you open to it? That's truly all we're saying, is that be aware that there's something more in the world, and isn't it a joy to explore? Simple as that, right?
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Yeah, and I think, not to go too far into this, but I think you're right, everything is in divine timing for sure. And, what happened in the 60s and 70s, this conversation could have taken place back then in a very different way with different words and different framing. But I think one of the reasons why it's such a perfect time now is that there was a huge, the whole war on drugs, and part of that came from seeing that people were accessing their inner wisdom and their freedom and their power and understanding who they really were in a really wonderful, powerful way of oneness and helping their brothers and sisters out, and, governments and religions and lots of other organizations started to come in to say, no, wait, we've got to stop this. And so that pause, was because there was lots of, studies. I mean, these are, molecules that were developed by a pharmaceutical company in a lab that had data and science behind them. But of course, many of us know the story that a lot of it did get out, and it was not in the right set and setting, or not in a set and setting that was conducive to this happening in a way that was a little bit more accepting, I should say. Not that there was anything wrong with anything, but there is a lot of data and science on this, and there is a lot of knowledge behind it. And I think it did go underground because there was, sort of this ebb and flow of dark and light, and there always will be till, that's just how the universe works. And so, yeah, I think it's interesting to see now this big, it just feels like this big gust of beautiful, bright light and cool breeze wind that just says, let's release all of this. Let's raise the vibration. Let's go to another place. And I'm not saying that psychedelics is the be all end all, because psychedelics will not enlighten you. They will remind you of oneness and what it is to be enlightened, but it's always still your work here in this lifetime, in this body, whichever body you chose, to do the integration work, to remember who you really are. So I feel that the spiritual toolbox is so important for people to develop, which has potentially nothing to do with psychedelics, but it has to do with breath work and yoga and different things that help you understand the multidimensional universe that exists, and to really just feel into who you are, so that when you do have these experiences, that you're not looking to have the experience to go somewhere, that you recognize, oh no, I am that. Because otherwise, if we're just doing, let's just keep it on psychedelics for a minute, if we're doing psychedelics to go there, but we can't achieve it on our own in this dimension, then we get to a place where we're just doing drugs. And that's not what we need to do. It's about, oh, thank you for reminding me of that really great point that I am perfect and whole. Now let me practice it. Now let me come back here into the lifetime that I set myself up for and practice it. And that's where people don't want to do the work, right? People are still like, oh, I don't want to do the work. I want to just go there. And then again, I feel like that's in the realm of doing drugs.
But also, too, if you look at it back into the 50s, 60s, and 70s, it was a time when, don't forget, antibiotics were not that old. They were only 20 or 30 years old. So the idea of even having a hospital and that you could come out alive, or that something could happen to you and, hey, maybe we could fix you. Medical science was just at its birth then. of hospitals and what doctors were doing. And it was essential that medicine had to grow first before our need of finding out about, any other drugs on our own. So medicine had to work first, because that was the development of the identity and the ego, which really came to blossom, in the year 2000. Because if you look at it, the 50s and 60s, hey, your kids are going to go to school. You might actually get past 8th grade. The 70s and 80s, braces, straight teeth. Are you kidding me? And then it was, in the 90s, it was all about plastic surgery and fixing up your body, and how many houses and how many cars and all that other stuff. And then what happened? The banks went down, the housing market went down, and all these other things started to fall down. But you had to feel into the identity. You had to feel into your ego. You had to know human. So do you not think, as I've shared it before, and I'm sure you have in your book, because I've read it a few different spots, is that we had to feel ourselves as the full-bodied human, having that full-bodied human experience before we were able to say that is a human identity, but it is not the me.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
So it takes a while to be able to go through this. I think what you and I have shared today is truly about how, society is evolving. People are moving along. Humanity is doing a great job. You and I are a little bit more ahead. We're more forerunners. So it's kind of, how are we creating this momentum, and how can you get into this flow? We want everybody to be able to be inspired to get into a flow of seeing something differently. Isn't that perhaps the goal of your book?
It is. And I think, just to add to that, it is about awakening. It is about awareness. It is about discernment. And I think even maybe in some degree more importantly for a lot of the already awakened, enlightened listeners, is to just remember that we're only here to be who we really are, and that means to shine the light and show the way. Otherwise, we can get caught up in helping others. And I'm not saying we don't help others, but the way we help others is to shine the light and show the way. Otherwise, there's a lot of stumbling blocks along the way, a lot of landmines that can take us in different directions. And sometimes, as we've already talked about, we've set ourselves up for those landmines to learn something more or something deeper. But I don't like the word faster, because it's still all divine timing, but the more present we can be with walking through each of life's experiences, as opposed to trying to discard them or shove the emotion down or pretend that they didn't happen or go find some other shiny, bright thing that takes away the pain or the suffering of that thing, whatever that thing is. The more awareness we can have and more conscious states we can have, that's where the beauty is. That's where everything lies. That's our connection to source. And I'm also a big advocate of Mother Nature. I think I read that you're a soul whisperer, and I'm a flower whisperer. So Mother Nature was just an incredible portal for me. The flowers came forward and said, look at me, and they did, and I could just access the divine in such a way. And then realizing, especially living in Bali, how Mother Nature and the energy just is this incredible reminder of source energy, and how easily Mother Nature's in the flow, and how it's constantly inviting us to be in the flow, as opposed to having this resistance of this third dimensional schlepping through life and trying to be somebody when we already perfect and whole. Yeah,
it's just such a different exploration. Beth, I've said so many times, I cannot wait till words go away. I am like anticipating that day with bated breath, because I seem to engage with others just by presence, and words don't really mean any factor to me. However, I think that we're getting to that point by connecting to nature, connecting in meditation, connecting in silence and our alone time, starting to let go some of all of this stuff, just as you said, the human dogma. Once you start to do that, man, it's like you just crave just sitting there and just closing your eyes. That kind of thing. Just like, let's just shut off all of that other stuff, And I think once you start to do that, that's when you really are truly on the path of awareness, because you'll start to open up to everything that's around you, perhaps.
Yes, absolutely.
Awesome. Beth, can you share with the listeners how to find out more information about your work? That would be wonderful.
Yeah, well, they can go to bethbell.me, so .me, Beth Bell, and I'm also on Instagram as Queen Bliss Bee. But on the website, there's a 11-minute introduction of the book, so that kind of can wet people's whistle. But there's also an Awakening and Healing Handbook that I'm finding people are loving, because a lot of what I talk about in the book, depending upon where you are in your spiritual journey, out to the listeners, is some of the terminology they don't know. Some of it they do. And so the Awakening and Healing Handbook has definitions. It talks more deeply about some of the modalities that I talk about, because the book is not a how-to book. It's an experiential book. And so the Awakening and Healing Handbook gives just a little bit more insights on that. And there's also a book club coming up, which is really exciting for people to dig a little bit deeper. I found that people said, I read the book so fast because I was so interested in the stories that I want to go back and reflect, or I'm worried that I'm just going to go back to my life as it is, but I was so inspired as I read through your journey. And so the book club has been born, and that's about to launch, and that offers people an opportunity to dig a little bit deeper, because it really is about everyone else's lessons. It's not so much about my stories. I'm just leveraging them as a great talking points and to connect, because, I think I share a lot of my stumbles and a lot of successes, and so it's fun to be able to just be in communion with others and share, our life experiences.
Awesome. Well, Beth, it was such a pleasure to have you with us today to share your story, because we've really taken, as I call it, a dance through the ethers and be able to say, isn't this awesome? And that's what we really wanted to share. So we thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I enjoyed it.
Thank you. If you'd like to find out more information about Beth Bell, again, her book is Angels, Herpes and Psychedelics, Unraveling the Mind to Unveil Illusions. Please do click on the link on the bottom of today's show page to go directly to her website for more information. And definitely check out information about what she shares about her book, about the video. It's a great idea to be able to say, this is awesome. Even if you only understand one word she says, perhaps you understand everything. Maybe you were just inspired or drawn to be there. Isn't that a great open window kind of opportunity to say there's something more? Let me step my foot outside and see what it's all about. That's about the awakening, about awareness, and about being able to step into your own next adventure. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is Dr. Jeanette-Gallagher, and until tomorrow, have a great day.
Today we discussed many life-changing concepts. Who do you turn to, and how do you know what is best when faced with a health crisis? Dr. Jeanette is a patient advocate. She listens to the patient, the doctors, and the family, clarifies the health issues and concerns, then helps the patient make the best choices going forward. If you would like help implementing change into your life and health, we can talk and see where you are stuck and how to improve the quality of your life. Check the link on the bottom of today's show page or visit dr.jeanette-gallagher.com to schedule a phone appointment today.